All right, let's do this. Welcome, everyone, to our deep dive into January 6th.
Yeah, a pretty pivotal moment in American history, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. A day that really shook the nation. And to understand it, we're not just going to skim the surface. We're going deep.
Deep dive.
Exactly. And we've got the goods, too. Tweets, court documents, leaked memos, even some testimonies. It's a whole mountain of sources.
It's going to paint, well, it already paints a pretty complex picture of everything that went down.
It really does.
Mm-hmm.
So our mission, if you will, is to go beyond those headlines. Figure out what forces were at play, who the key players were, and really understand, I think, what this all means for, well, for all of us, really.
I think a good place to start, actually, is to kind of rewind the clock a bit, way before 2020 even happened.
Before the election.
Yeah, because the idea of a rigged election, that whole narrative, those doubts, they were planted way earlier.
Okay, so where are we going? Back to 2016.
Even further back, actually. Think 2012. The seeds were already there. We can see it in the source material. Trump, even then, was talking about elections being rigged.
Wait, 2012, that's before he was even really in politics.
Exactly. There's this tweet from that year. He tells his supporters to march on Washington. Obama had just been reelected. Then there's this whole thing about how America's not a democracy. It's like early warning signs, you know?
I see. It's interesting, though, he didn't just target Democrats with this. Remember 2016? He went after Ted Cruz, his own party, during those primaries, accused him of fraud in Iowa.
Right. Didn't matter who it was, the message stayed the same. If Trump loses, it's rigged. That's the setup, right? And then fast forward to 2020, he's railing against mail-in voting, but never really offering any, solutions to actually make it more secure.
He just wanted it gone.
Yeah.
Because he thought it helped Democrats.
It seems that way, yeah. And this is where understanding how people were already anxious about mail-in voting comes in. This blue shift everyone was predicting. Conservative media, Fox News especially, really played this up. Remember that report from the Daily Beast about Fox trying to find anything to support Trump's claims, even though internally they knew it was, well, baseless.
Wow. So they were basically setting the stage for a specific outcome, no matter what the actual facts were.
Kinda, yeah. It's a bit concerning, isn't it?
Definitely concerning.
But there is one source that stands out from all this, and it's pretty important. The Lost, Not Stolen report, led by conservatives. And they completely debunked Trump's legal challenges.
So even within conservative circles, there were people acknowledging the election was legitimate.
Exactly, which is why this report is so important. It shows that not everyone bought into that stolen election narrative, even those who, may have supported Trump.
Makes you think.
Yeah.
But obviously, Trump didn't stop there. Election night and everything that followed was, well, kind of explosive.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the sources capture that anger and chaos perfectly. We've got Jason Miller's furious tweet attacking Fox News for calling Arizona for Biden. We've got Jared Kushner frantically calling Rupert Murdoch. It was a turning point, I think, where this whole narrative that had been building for years clashed with reality.
And the Dominion v. Fox News lawsuit just adds fuel to the fire. It's shocking to read those quotes from Fox insiders admitting they knew the election fraud claims were bogus, and yet they kept pushing those lies to their audience, knowing the damage it could cause.
Which raises a really critical question. What does that do to public trust when you have a major news network promoting blatant falsehoods? We're talking about eroding faith in democratic institutions, increasing polarization. The damage is, well, pretty deep.
Damage we're still dealing with, even today. So while the nation was still trying to process everything that happened on election night, Trump was already working behind the scenes, launching a whole attack on the election results. And that's where things get really interesting.
It was a pressure campaign, unlike anything we've seen in modern American history. I mean, You look at the sources, it's clear. They were trying to overturn the election results. Relentless.
It's remarkable when you put it all together like this. So let's break it down, this pressure campaign. We have sources that detail Trump calling various state officials, like that infamous call on January 2nd to Brad Raffensperger.
Oh, yeah, Georgia's Secretary of State. That call was huge.
Huge is an understatement. We actually have the transcript, and it's wild.
Yeah.
Trump straight up tells Raffensperger to find him 11,000 votes.
Wow.
And it gets worse. He accuses him of criminal activity, threatens to pull election support if he doesn't comply.
He was really trying to use his power to force this state official into changing the election results.
Exactly. And Raffensperger wasn't the only one. reports of similar calls to other officials, all trying to manufacture enough votes to flip the election. It's unbelievable.
It is. And then, on top of all that, there's another layer to this whole thing. These coup memos by John Eastman.
Right, the legal scholar. These memos are so fascinating, but so disturbing, too. He basically lays out a plan for Pence to reject electoral votes on January 6th.
A blueprint for a constitutional crisis.
And what's crazy is Eastman knew it. He even says in the memos that parts of this plan violate the Electoral Count Act.
Yeah, he knew it was legally shaky, but he pushed for it anyway. Shows you how far they were willing to go.
Absolutely. And this pressure campaign, it didn't just stop with state officials. Mike Pence, he became a target too.
The pressure on him must have been immense.
I can't even imagine. We're talking private meetings, phone calls, public statements, all trying to get Pence to use his role on January 6th to overturn the election.
If he had given in, it would have been a disaster for democracy.
No kidding. It would have set a precedent, letting a VP override the will of the people. Thankfully, Pence stood his ground, did his duty, certified the results, but the stage was already set for January 6th. All the rhetoric, the misinformation, that pressure campaign, it all led to what happened at the Capitol.
A day that will never be forgotten.
So let's talk about January 6th itself. We've got footage from the rally at the Ellipse where Trump spoke. And, well, his words were incendiary.
Definitely a step up from anything we'd seen before.
He tells them to fight like hell, talks about trial by combat. He even says Mike Pence is going to have to come through for us. It's almost like he's giving them permission to take matters into their own hands.
And that's exactly what they did. It's tragic.
As the mob stormed the Capitol, two groups stand out, the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers. The sources show they were both super active in that whole Stop the Steal movement, and they both have a history of violence, extremism.
We have a timeline. It shows their movements that day. The Proud Boys, they got to the Capitol early, made these organized attempts to get past security.
And the Oath Keepers, they had these weapon stashes, quick reaction force teams stationed nearby, ready to go. It seems clear they were ready for a fight.
Yeah. The question is, were they coordinating with Trump? That's what investigators are trying to figure out. It's complicated. We know Trump told these groups to stand back and stand by during the campaign, and then there are those texts from rally organizers to Mark Meadows begging Trump to call off the mob.
So he was aware of what was happening, but did nothing.
It seems like at the very least there was some tacit approval from Trump. But to prove a criminal conspiracy, that's a whole other thing.
Definitely. And as this riot was going on, the human cost became clear. People were injured, some died. The trauma that so many experienced, it's immeasurable.
Yeah, it really is.
And you look at the Justice Department report, it really hits home.
All those charges, the convictions, the investigations that are still going on, January 6th was a huge deal. It wasn't just about property damage, it was an attack on our democracy.
Yeah, right. They tried to stop the peaceful transfer of power, something that has been a hallmark of American democracy for centuries. And what's really scary is you read the court documents, social media posts, you see all these rioters saying they were following Trump's orders.
They thought they were patriots, saving the country. It shows the power of propaganda and misinformation. These people were manipulated into doing something terrible.
That's why it's so important to understand January 6th fully. To see those warning signs, how norms eroded, how these lies spread. This isn't about dwelling on the past. It's about recognizing the threats to democracy that are still out there.
The forces that were at play that day, they haven't gone away. Disinformation, political division, people willing to use violence to get what they want politically. We have to deal with these things.
So what does January 6th tell us about misinformation, about how fragile democracy is, about what we as citizens have to do to protect our institutions? These are questions we need to think about. This conversation needs to continue. It's a lot to take in, when you really think about everything that led up to January 6th. And it wasn't just some, isolated incident. This was years in the making, all this misinformation, the political maneuvering.
Yeah, a culmination of a lot of things. And that's why we have to see it as a wake-up call. It showed us where our democracy is vulnerable. And those vulnerabilities, they can be exploited if we're not careful.
It's easy to get lost in the weeds,
Yeah.
all the legal stuff, the politics. But we can't forget about the people who were hurt that day, injured, traumatized.
Right.
The families who lost loved ones.
Right. It's a reminder that when we let democratic norms erode, when we let misinformation run wild, there are real-world consequences, and they can be really bad.
So what do we do now? What can we learn from January 6th to make sure this never happens again?
Well, I think media literacy is crucial. Being able to to look at information critically, tell what's real and what's fake. There's so much coming at us these days from all directions. We have to be able to filter that, find sources we can trust.
And it's not just on individuals either. We need to make our institutions stronger, hold people in power accountable, make sure our systems can't be undermined so easily.
Definitely. We have to be proactive about protecting our democracy. It takes all of us, a commitment to truth, and a willingness to stand up for democratic principles, even when it's tough.
Well, this has been a really eye-opening deep dive. January 6th was a scary reminder that democracy is fragile. We can't take it for granted.
We can't. It's up to all of us to stay informed, talk to each other, and participate in shaping our future. It matters.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everyone. We hope you learned something new about January 6th and what it means for our country even today.